My blood turned to ice as Amanda slid each glossy photograph across the polished mahogany dining table. The snapshots showed me, head tilted, hand occasionally touching an arm, smiling and engaged with different men in restaurants and cafes around the city. The sharp intake of breath from my mother-in-law Eleanor filled the suddenly airless room. "Look at these," Amanda said, her voice dripping with performative concern as she turned to my husband. "While David has been working himself to exhaustion, she's been running around town with other men." She placed her hand on his shoulder, standing too close to him, while Jessica, the woman he'd been sleeping with for months, sat silently at his other side. Amanda's eyes gleamed with triumph as she delivered her final blow. "Now you don't have to feel guilty about Jessica, and you definitely don't have to give Sophie anything in the divorce." My name is Sophie Bennett. I'm 32, and this is the story of how I turned my husband's family's betrayal into the most important lesson they'd ever learn. The family I had devoted 8 years to gathered around those photos like vultures. Eleanor picked one up with trembling fingers, her voice breaking with practiced disappointment. "Sophie, how could you? We welcomed you into our family." Once, her words would have cut deep. Now I just observed her performance with clinical detachment. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Amanda demanded, one hand propped on her hip, the other dramatically pointing at the evidence spread before everyone. I took a deliberately slow sip of water, my eyes moving across the table. David still wouldn't meet my gaze. His parents looked appropriately devastated, though I noticed his father, George, seemed more uncomfortable than angry. Amanda stood tall, her posture radiating righteousness. "Nice pictures," I said calmly. "The lighting is excellent. You must have paid your private investigator quite a lot." Amanda's triumphant smile faltered. This wasn't the tearful denial she had scripted for this moment. "That's all you have to say?" she snapped. "You're not even going to deny it?" I reached into my purse, feeling everyone tense, waiting for tears, or perhaps a desperate confession. Instead, I placed my tablet on the table, its screen dark and reflective against the wood. Why would I deny it? My voice remained steady. Those men are all divorce lawyers. The silence that followed was absolute. "What?" Amanda stuttered, her composure cracking. I pointed to each photo methodically. "That's James Morrison, the best family lawyer in the city. This is Michael Turner. His firm specializes in cases involving infidelity. And this dinner, that's William Parker. He's particularly skilled at handling cases where people try to hide assets before a divorce." Amanda's face drained of color. David suddenly found his water glass fascinating. "You see," I continued, "when I discovered David and Jessica 3 months ago, I decided to prepare properly." "You're lying," Amanda said, but uncertainty had replaced her confidence. I activated my tablet, displaying emails and signed agreements. The wonderful thing about legal consultations is that there's always documentation. I scrolled through the files deliberately. "But that's not even the most interesting part," I added, finally looking directly at David. "What do you mean?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "Well," I said, "during one of these meetings, I learned something fascinating about recent property transfers in this family. Lots of money and houses changing hands, new companies being formed." I let the implications settle over the room. George shifted uncomfortably in his chair. David frowned, turning to his father. "Dad, is that why you had me sign those papers last month? You said it was just routine family business." I watched realization dawn on his face. His family wasn't just helping him cheat, they were systematically hiding assets before the divorce. "David, sweetheart, we were just protecting you," Eleanor began. "Actually," I cut her off, "you were committing fraud." I smiled thinly. "And my lawyers have documented everything." Amanda collapsed into a chair, the architect of her perfect trap suddenly finding herself ensnared. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew this whole time." I nodded, gathering my belongings. "Next time you hire a private investigator, make sure they're not working for both sides." I stood, smoothing my dress. "Oh, and David, your lawyer will receive the paperwork tomorrow. You might want to read it carefully, especially the part about fraud." At the door, I turned back to Amanda. "Thanks for the photos. They'll make excellent evidence." My heels struck the floor like a metronome as I walked out. Only when I reached my car did I finally allow myself a small, private smile. They thought they had trapped me, but they had no idea what was coming. The next few days unleashed chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from David's family, threats mingled with tearful pleas. Amanda cycled between rage and panic, her texts growing increasingly desperate. "You can't do this to us, we're family," her latest message read. That word, family, lingered in my mind. They hadn't treated me like family when they were planning to leave me with nothing. I archived her message without responding and focused on my preparations. James Morrison's law office projected exactly the power it intended: gleaming wood, supple leather chairs, and an atmosphere of quiet authority. I reviewed documents in the conference room while waiting for the others to arrive. Right on schedule, David entered with his lawyer, followed by Eleanor and George. Amanda trailed behind, attempting confidence, but failing visibly. "Mrs. Bennet," James greeted me with a professional nod. "Shall we begin?" I watched David's expression as James methodically presented our evidence. He paled noticeably when we displayed our timeline. Every suspicious property transfer, every hastily created company, every deliberate attempt to hide money. Eleanor clutched his arm when James mentioned potential criminal charges. "This is nonsense," David's lawyer protested. "These were normal family business decisions." "Were they?" I asked, sliding forward a stack of documents. "Because these records show my name was removed from family business assets exactly 3 months ago, precisely when David began his affair. Quite a coincidence, don't you think?" George shifted uncomfortably. He had always been the weakest link, too concerned about his social standing to risk public scandal. "Now," James continued, "we're prepared to be reasonable. Mrs. Bennet helped build this family's success. She simply wants her fair share." "Fair share?" Amanda snapped. "She's trying to ruin us." I turned to her, maintaining my composure. "No, Amanda, I'm protecting what I helped create." I paused. "Would you like me to play the recording of you and David discussing how to keep the gold digger from getting anything?" Her face went white. David's head snapped up. "You recorded us?" "No," I replied calmly. "Your mistress did. Jessica was quite helpful once I showed her proof that you were planning to discard her too, once you'd secured your assets." The room erupted. Eleanor dissolved into tears. George demanded to speak with his personal lawyer. Amanda screamed about betrayal. Through it all, I sat quietly, watching my husband realize how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. "Here's what's going to happen," James spoke over the chaos, his voice commanding immediate silence. "We have documented evidence of attempted fraud. We can pursue this criminally, or we can reach a reasonable settlement today. Your choice." David's lawyer requested a moment with his client. As they huddled in the corner, I could see the fight draining from David's body. He'd always been arrogant, convinced of his own cleverness, but now he looked hollowed out. "We'll agree to fair terms," his lawyer finally announced. "Excellent," James smiled. "Mrs. Bennet has already outlined her requirements." He distributed copies of my settlement proposal. I'd been thorough but not vindictive. I wanted what I'd helped build, nothing more. "This is outrageous," Eleanor exclaimed, but George placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Sign it, David," he said quietly. "We can't risk this getting out." As David picked up the pen, Amanda made one last desperate attempt. "Wait!" Those photos, they were in public places. She was flaunting these meetings. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Of course they were public. I wanted you to see them. Every lunch, every coffee meeting. I knew you were having me followed. I just made sure your investigator captured exactly what I wanted you to see. The realization that they'd been played at their own game finally silenced them. One by one, the documents were signed. As James gathered the paperwork, I stood to leave. "Sophie," David called, his voice strange. "When did you get so calculating?" I paused at the door. I learned from the best, didn't I? Family taught me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As I walked out of the office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning, it's about showing them they underestimated you all along. Outside, the autumn air felt crisp and clean. To discard her just like me after securing his wealth. Sometimes the strongest alliances come from unexpected places. Driving home, I thought about family, not the one that had betrayed me, but the one I would build for myself now, on my own terms. 6 months after the settlement, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping coffee and watching the city awaken. Morning sunlight cast long shadows across my newly furnished living room, highlighting the fresh start I'd created. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica of all people. We'd maintained an unlikely friendship after everything. "You won't believe who I just saw at Riverside Cafe. Amanda, she actually tried to pretend she didn't see me." I smiled, remembering how thoroughly the family had unraveled after our meeting. Their carefully constructed facade of perfect family business had cracked under the weight of their own schemes. George had retired early, claiming health issues, but everyone knew it was to avoid the whispers at his precious country club. Eleanor had thrown herself into charity work, desperately trying to maintain their social standing. Amanda perhaps had faced the harshest reality check. Her role in the attempted fraud had cost her position in the family company. Last I'd heard, she was working as a junior accountant at a small firm, a significant step down from her former executive title. My phone rang. James Morrison. "Sophie," he greeted warmly. "Just wanted to let you know the last of the transfers are complete. Everything's officially settled." "Thank you, James, for everything." "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in all my years practicing law, I've never seen someone handle betrayal with such strategic precision. Have you ever considered a career change?" I laughed, but his words resonated. In outmaneuvering David and his family, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed: strength, cunning, and an ability to see several moves ahead. Later that afternoon, I met Laura, my closest friend, for lunch. She'd been my rock throughout everything, one of the few people who knew the whole story from the beginning. "Have you heard?" she asked, sliding into her seat. "David's been demoted. Apparently, some of his business decisions during the divorce drama didn't sit well with the board." I shook my head. "I'm not surprised. He always did think he was smarter than everyone else." "Speaking of smart," Laura leaned forward, "how's the new venture going?" After the settlement, I'd used part of my funds to start a consulting firm helping other women navigate complex divorces and financial disputes. It felt right, using my experience to help others protect themselves. "We're expanding," I said, unable to hide my pride. "Opened a second office last week." "Look at you," Laura grinned. "From being blindsided by your husband's betrayal to running your own empire. Who would have thought?" I reflected on the woman I'd been a year ago, trusting, naive, willing to believe in family loyalty above all else. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, but not bitter. If anything, I was grateful for the lessons learned. My phone buzzed again, another text from Eleanor. "I miss you. The family isn't the same without you." I archived it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. That evening, as I reviewed applications for my firm's mentorship program, I reflected on how life had changed. The family that had tried to destroy me had inadvertently set me free. Their attempts to leave me with nothing had pushed me to become something more than I'd ever imagined. The doorbell rang. Jessica with a bottle of wine. Our monthly catch-up sessions had become a tradition of sorts. "To Karma," she raised her glass, settling onto my couch. "David's dating someone new, by the way. Poor girl has no idea what she's getting into." "Should we warn her?" I asked, half joking. Jessica laughed. "Something tells me she'll figure it out on her own. Besides, I hear she's quite clever with computers."